It's Monday, December 7th, 2020. I'm Rim.
I'm Scott.
And this is Geek Nights. Tonight we are talking about putting your technology on life support, how to wring the most out of it. All right, you got an opening bit?
No, we turned it into the main bit.
Yeah. Have I done anything, changed anything? Yeah, I got a really, really basic, lame opening bit. So it is finally too cold for me to just go running outside like I usually do. I push it late into the season, but it's just too cold. I guess I could put on a bunch of like spandex and gear and go out there in a hat, but that's a pain. So I've moved to riding my bike to nowhere, like you've been biking to nowhere.
Yeah, bike to nowhere. Woo! You should, I guess your bike to nowhere isn't going to be Zwift compatible. We can't bike to nowhere together.
Oh, hell no. Plus, the kind of biking I'm doing is mostly either on it for an hour doing intervals the whole hour or like spin class type stuff. So I'm watching Netflix shows.
It does that.
Yeah, but that's all I do.
Mm.
So what I'm doing is I'm watching shows that I'm interested in, but not super interested in.
But aren't there shows you're super interested in that you haven't watched?
Shows I'm super interested in, I'll sit down like with dinner or like with a drink and watch as a dedicated event. But this is like, I'll watch a whole episode of The Old Unsolved Mysteries while I'm biking. So I started watching The Queen's Gambit, and it's pretty good. And it portrays chess very accurately, which I'm very happy about. It's
hard to portray chess inaccurately, right?
Yeah.
There's not too much to it.
But I guess I've just noticed a trend in the last like five-ish years where when there's a show on like one of these streaming services, like one of those shows that's made in the modern pipeline, like not a broadcast TV show, and it portrays like games of any kind, for whatever's changed, they're definitely getting someone who knows at least one thing about the game that's going to appear to make sure that they don't portray it completely stupidly. And I've just noticed that generally in media, which is a big change from like 10 or 15 years ago, where like if a video game appeared in a show, it would always be like super fakey.
I don't know if people remember this, but it was a big deal for a very short amount of time. There was a TV show that for some reason decided to have the characters on the TV show playing Netrunner. There must have been some nerd on the cast of the show or the staff or the production staff, something like that, that there was a scene in which the people on the show are playing Netrunner. I don't think Fantasy Flight had anything to do with it because there were some Netrunner friends I had in New York who were basically like went there, right, to be extras in the background playing Netrunner at the Netrunner tournament, and also to consult them cast of the dialogue of the very brief scene. That there was a scene was not, way off the mark. So you can probably on YouTube search, I forget which TV show it was. It was some live action TV show. And you can hear some TV actors saying Netrunner words, playing Netrunner cards, and maybe see some people I know in like 1 second of footage in the background or something. I don't know.
Yep. I just remember back to like the 90s, the 2000s, like a video game would be in a show and you'd see like an Adam Sandler or someone just like randomly mashing the shit out of a controller, and they'd show a fake video game on the screen for like a second. Times have changed. So it's Monday. It's Tech News Day. We can't quite do a Tech News roundup yet as much as I would.
It's on it's on YouTube. It's the title of the video is Billions Netrunner Taylor and Oscar Langstrat S3E5. So I don't know.
Oh, I found it. Yep.
Yeah, so whatever that's it. That's the scene. It's 1 minute and 35 seconds long.
Yeah. All right, so Monday, you got any news?
Yeah, so let's start with this tiny news, right? We all know Apple's M1 chip. We've talked about it to death. The rumor, seems like a true rumor. It's not an outrageous rumor. It's more like a thing that would be common sense. It's like, yeah, I figured that out for myself, but now people are officially rumoring it.
Yeah.
they're rumoring a more specific detail.
There's a difference between, yeah, that makes sense versus I heard specifically they're doing it.
Exactly. So the specific thing that people are saying is that obviously they put the M1 into the MacBook Pro and into the Mac Mini. Well, that leaves your iMac and your Mac Pro, right? And maybe, and they also put it in the MacBook Air, right? So that leaves the iMac and the Mac Pro still running x86. You know they're going to get ARM chips next round, right?
Yeah.
It's like obvious. But the specific rumor, is that probably the Mac Pro is going to have some ARM chip with possibly 32 cores, high performance ones in it. That is going to, if true, and if the single core performance on that is quite strong, I think you could finally, because up until now, the Mac Pro has always been a bad investment money-wise, right?
Yep.
It costs a fortune, and even though it is quite strong,
and aspects of it are stronger than the market when it comes out. Not all aspects are.
some of them, but if you look at it when it comes out, like the day it comes out, if you put it right up against build your own Intel PC at home, right? It not only is like not too far ahead of that performance-wise, if it's ahead at all, and it's way ahead of it price-wise. It's like, oh, I could buy 2 computers with GT 3080s, assuming I can get one, instead of buying one Mac Pro.
Yeah, 3080 MSRP, not that expensive for how powerful it is.
Right, exactly. So, but if that chip has 32 high-performance cores in it, that's taking like enterprise hardware and putting it in consumer tech, right? There are existing like ARM server CPUs you can get, like I forget what they're called, those like the N something or whatever, that are really ridiculous CPUs that you're never going to buy because there's nothing you can run on them at home that makes sense for you.
Yeah, and usually those kinds of chips have a way lower clock speed because they're doing a very different kind of task.
Yeah, but the point is, if you could get that kind of like, enterprise power onto your desk, then the $5,000 to $10,000 price range of the Mac Pro with that chip in it begins to make sense.
Yup.
Anyone who actually needs ludicrous performance.
And at that point, like the only thing we're really lacking here is the ability to put a real GPU in one of these M1s.
Right. And at that point, you also begin to stop caring about the fact the major downside of the Mac is that it does not run all software ever created.
Yeah.
Which Windows does. But if Apple can push performance hard enough, right? We're already seeing that they can run old x86 OS X apps with their Rosetta, sometimes, faster or almost as fast as they did on x86.
Yup.
You could just emulate a whole goddamn Windows PC.
Just
right?
call me.
And not even give a shit.
Call me when like a premier like 100% CPU, no GPU possible effect renders faster on one of these M1s than on like a high-end Intel chip.
See a future years from now where even the Windows person, it's like, well, all these PCs suck ass. I'm going to buy the Mac because it's the most powerful PC on earth.
Yep.
And then in a virtual machine, I'll put Windows 10, and it's going to be faster than any Windows 10 PC you've ever had. In a virtual machine, you can just play Counter-Strike in it. It's faster than Counter-Strike on Windows. It's natively, and that's the end of it, right? And you run all your software ever.
I'm still just I'm cautious here because these benchmarks are synthetic.
All benchmarks are synthetic.
They are. But for example, what kind of like stutter latency is there in the emulation layer? What about like very CPU intensive, like require a high speed? Like there's a lot of unknowns around gaming in particular.
Yes, but what we're seeing is that in the ARM architecture world, where it's especially not, mobile CPUs and also the server CPUs.
The vast majority of computing usage, like gaming is kind of an edge niche case.
We are seeing big performance gains, right? Like 20, 30%, generation on generation, right? Like they're moving. Whereas x86 is not moving. AMD's making some gains. Intel dropped the ball a few years ago.
Yep.
But it's like x86 is not, getting the rock up the hill.
Yep. It's tricky though, because that said, there was an era. Now the difference was no one was moving off of x86. But remember back when there were alpha chips, you could run Windows NT at like 500 megahertz, and a normal like x86 chip could only run like 100.
Oh, the PowerPC like chips from
Yeah, all those eras. There was also the era where Intel, just like today, hit this long plateau. The Pentium 3, Pentium 4 era together were not impressive to anyone. But at that time, they were surpassed momentarily by changes in technology. But then they basically, whatever they were up to, either it was Skunkworks R&D or some product manager said, oh shit, I guess we got to start like advancing again. They suddenly just blew everyone out of the water again out of nowhere.
There was, there are very various reasons for that. But yes, it's true. There's never ever in any technology area, right? Think that any one company or platform is like the winner forever. We're talking about it could become the winner because it's currently not the winner.
Yep. x86 lasted a long time. What we don't know now is if x86 can continue to scale on hardware, or if the paradigm shift to a different instruction set is the only way to take advantage of modern material science.
Yeah, but yeah, so it's like, in Apple, right? They died, they came back, right?
Yep.
It's like it happens, right? It's like, various companies, they look like they're the biggest deal in the world, and then they go away.
But that's what I wonder, because
sometimes they don't.
Intel's been relatively.
Facebook can die. Everyone can die.
I mean, MySpace died.
Yeah.
But Intel has been weirdly quiet in this whole scene, with Intel chips not getting materially better.
You need to read about the organizational internal difficulties that Intel has had.
I have.
Going on for a while.
Part of the reason why I have is that I've had recruiters come after me from Intel.
Yeah, you don't work there.
No, I don't respond to recruiters anyway, but it was interesting that these recruiters were from Intel.
It's not good.
But the question I have is either Intel has R&D that is not public, or Intel does not have R&D that is not public in regard to addressing this competitor in their space. And I don't know which of those is true. And it's going to be a material because I got to build an HTPC probably before I can get an M1 that'll run Windows and let me put an NVIDIA GPU in it.
I say this every time, but watch out. The NVIDIA CPU is coming.
Yeah. Well,
I'm surprised if the all NVIDIA computer comes. I'm like half betting on it.
For someone like me, the all NVIDIA computer is almost a dream in the same way that the Winamp OS was a dream in ancient times.
Right, so
the old standby was if your computer's unstable, run Winamp. It'll actually stabilize it.
Right, so I thought that'd be a 1-minute news, but we've recorded for 13 minutes.
There's a lot to say about it. So you want to talk about your Pornhub thing?
Oh yeah. So,
this is actually a pretty big deal.
Well, so this is old news, right? Is that, if you're in the porn business specifically, right? Obviously, if you're in the drug business, it's even harder, but
yep. Unless you're selling opioids, apparently. But
if you are selling sex, right? Whether it is you're doing it morally and correctly and legally or not, it's very hard to collect money, right? American Express, right, will not let you use them. Like, they will not let you accept American Express cards if you're running, like, even a legitimate, perfectly legal, sex business.
Yep. Now, this is wrong. Like, sex work should not be criminalized. Like, this whole space has a lot of buried leads and assumptions that shouldn't necessarily be assumptions.
Exactly. I support the decriminalization of sex work. This is basically what sex workers have said that I see on and follow on the internet.
Yep.
Right? They want it to be decriminalized, not legalized, right? Which is different, right? From being decriminalized.
Yep. The shortest version of the argument I've seen is that legalizing it is a danger now primarily because of capitalism, in that people will be forced into it if it is a legal profession. But if it is if it's decriminalized but not legalized, then people can do it safely. But a welfare agency couldn't say, well, you didn't take that porn job, so we're not going to pay you.
Yep. Regardless, the payment industry is the primary barrier for legitimate sex workers, especially on the internet. They need to collect money somehow. They need a payment processor to get money from someone jacking off at their house into the wallet of the naked person who's showing it off, right? Two consenting adults happen to be using the internet. They want to do this. I got no problem with it, right? So it's hard because if you set up like PayPal, it's like PayPal will just be like, no.
Yep.
It's like you're gonna cancel.
Or look
your
at
account.
Patreon. Patreon, a huge percentage of Patreon money is porny stuff, but that's part of why Patreon doesn't make it easy to find that porny stuff through their own tools to avoid these kinds of problems.
This is less of a problem for major porn sites like, say, Pornhub, probably the biggest porn site that I know of, right? It's the one everyone knows.
Yep.
So Pornhub, you could use, Visa, MasterCard on Pornhub to buy porns, right? Until now, or did they threaten to cut them off? They did cut them off. But basically, there were investigations, allegations, perhaps a lot of truth to, that Pornhub, they let you just upload porn to Pornhub, which I think was a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, they take every problem YouTube has and multiply it by porn. That is a problem for you as a business.
That's the way a lot of porn sites are operating these days, is they just let everyone upload porn and then they take down the stuff that is, not supposed to be up there, like, the child porn. And
Yep. Non-consensual pornography, which is the heart of this article.
Yes, exactly. So obviously Pornhub not doing a perfect job of removing that stuff from its own service. So that's why they're getting cut off, right? So Amex and not Amex. Amex isn't okay with any of it. They don't do. They won't even. But
now, on one hand,
we're like, hey, we will let you accept, take money for porn as a legal, law-abiding business, but it seems you got some child porn and perhaps revenge porns and other porns you shouldn't be having on your website. So we're going to cut you off and you can't make money. And that not only, that even if that correctly harms people who are uploading that shit that shouldn't, that's no good, right? That those people, some of them should even be in jail, some of those people, right?
Yep.
Or punished by some system that is, a fair justice system or whatever, that some brought to some justice somehow, those bad people. The perfectly good porn stars that are consensual adults, just sex working as they should be, get hosed by this, right? They're like this huge industry, right? It's like a few bad people, uploading some child porns, right?
It's even worse than that because Pornhub's argument
normally gets ruined.
Is that like Pornhub's argument here is that the Visa and MasterCard are applying a double standard to them because they primarily work in the space of pornography, but non-pornographic sites like Facebook and Instagram have way more illegal pornography on them than Pornhub does. Pornhub is not doing a great job and should not be letting people upload the way that they do. Like that is a dangerous and risky business model, but even Pornhub is doing a way better job than like Facebook is.
Yep. Exactly.
Why isn't Facebook cut off?
Because there's a social stigma, like whole thing against porn, right? It's like, sometimes the bad kid in class is the bad kid in class.
Yep.
It's like, I remember there was, remember a pup named Scooby-Doo? There was always Red Herring, the book, right? And they'd always accuse him every single episode.
And it was never him.
It was an adult in a costume every time.
But sometimes it's like Gog Manga VRE, where the bad kid is the bad kid who did the bad thing.
So they're always looking at, it's like he was a bully and he was a jerk and no one liked him and you didn't want to be his friend, but it's like, was he actually committing all those crimes?
Well, he didn't commit this crime.
So he did.
He did not commit this one crime that we were actively engaged in. He committed all these other crimes.
Right. It is whataboutism to say, well, other people are doing it too. Right.
Yep.
It's like, well, if you did this, you should be punished for it. Right. You should face the consequences.
But the fact that Visa and MasterCard would never, ever cut Facebook off is a problem.
No, because they make so much money. How many transactions?
But look, Facebook, the COVID denial stuff, the election stuff, Facebook arguably has caused more harm to American society than 1,000 Pornhubs combined. Yet Facebook is totally safe here, and Facebook has more illegal pornography than Pornhub does. That's the problem.
I think that, I'd really like to see somebody set up. I think they do exist, but they're not, from what I'm aware
a payment processor that's like, we'll let it all go?
Yes. Yeah, it's like people have done this. There are payment processors that do this, but some of them are a little shady. I'd love to see someone set up a major, awesome, trustworthy payment processor that will do this. The problem is, suddenly now as that payment processor, you're put in the place of, all right, you're going to police everyone fairly?
Right? Payment processors arguably are not on the hook to a police shit except around money laundering and things because they're just back-end infrastructure.
If you aren't policing anything, then I don't want to run that business. I don't want to send money, be responsible for sending money to
Well, like Cloudflare, for like, there's that whole debate of should they host Nazis? Like, no, fuck you. Don't host Nazis at all.
That's right. But
there's a side story here.
You're on the hook.
There's a side story. I won't even dig up a link, but Parler, the place where shitty people go to have their only shitty people social network, apparently the problem they're having is that because they're so aggressively free speech and there's no like blocking tools, it's filled with nothing but ads for pornography now.
That makes sense.
Yep. That it is, but it's not just because the spam is not blocked because of free speech. It's actually worse than that. The companies are advertising to the kinds of people that they know will use that service. Right-wing nut job shitbags, basically. So there's a whole ecosystem of like awful pornography spam aimed at awful people who use Parler, destroying the platform.
Why don't we go there and post some spam?
I do not want to engage with Parler. A nice heuristic in your life: if someone you know uses Gab or Parler as a social network, you should probably never speak to them again.
That's a good idea. But
so
you could also scam them out of their money.
You probably could. I feel like if I was going to make a pyramid scheme, Parler is exactly where I would sell it. Gonna form a cult? That is the first place I buy ads.
Okay. Buy ads. Start your cult by buying ads.
I mean, I feel like that's how you do it. That's how Scientology got their start.
I guess.
So, in some other really, really unfortunate and sad news, the Arecibo Observatory, if you weren't paying attention to this, is gone. It collapsed. It's dead. We lost it. Thank you, America, for not funding this.
We spent our money armoring police instead.
Yep. Basically, Arecibo was an incredible, I'm not going to explain everything that this radio telescope did. This was one of the more important scientific apparati that humans have ever created in our entire history. It's in Puerto Rico. It is a gigantic radio telescope. I'm not going to explain how radio telescopes work because that is a huge topic. I do know a little bit about it.
We have other ones, right?
We do.
But it doesn't mean, we don't have that many, and each one gets used a lot and is super important.
Yeah, let's be clear here. Arecibo was not obsolete. Arecibo's budget was cut to the point that they couldn't do enough basic maintenance. It started to run into trouble, and it got to the point to where it didn't make sense to continue to maintain it with the budgets that they had, considering all the competing priorities. And there was a plan to decommission it and try to save whatever technology we could out of it. And the lack of maintenance was so severe that it actually just collapsed on its own before they could even salvage components out of it. There's a terrifying and sad video of this happening.
In fact, they knew that it was going to mess up, right? It wasn't like it was sabotage. They inspected it and were like, yeah, this thing's going to fall down any day now. These cables are all messed up. This is not going to work out. It's going down. And then sure enough, a few days later, it went down. That's how smart they were. I mean, people who work at a radio telescope are probably pretty smart, at least at some things, right? So,
yep.
Radio telescopes. So they knew it was done for, but what could they do about it, right? They didn't have the money to fix it. It was, to fix up. It's huge and heavy and fancy and unique. Fixing it is a huge endeavor that requires a lot of money. If you don't have the money, it's like, well, your hands are tied. There's nothing you can do. You just gotta. They abandoned it basically so that no one would be around in case it fell, and so no one was hurt, and it fell when it fell.
Yep. Now, a lot of nerds like to argue that, we got to fund NASA to go into space with humans, and like there's these very specific things they want to fund. But Stuff like this is probably way more important to scientific discovery and understanding space than the flashy things that nerds tend to gravitate to.
I mean, I sort of say that, but I just say, hey, look, fund nerdy things, right? To after you've funded all the more important things, but nerdy things deserve quite a bit of funding, more so than guns do, at least, and fund them sufficiently.
Yeah, the boring nerdy things are the ones that benefit society the most.
Right. We have too many, right, on the right and the left, or every politician, right? They're all trying to micromanage, right? Saying, you know, even JFK was micromanaging when he said, NASA, go to the moon. Right?
Yeah, we probably should not have tried to go to the moon at the time that we did. In fact, there's a documentary out recently where you can watch that whole process.
Other reasons, right? My policy would be, give huge budget to science and arts and education and everything, and then the people who run those things will decide on the budget. I have decided only that science is super important, and I will let scientists decide the rest.
Yep.
Right?
There's a thing I think
direct them and say no boring telescopes, rockets are exciting.
It's a thing that's bothered me more and more as I've started to notice it more and more. But there's a lot of nerds and geeks out there who will almost performatively express their love of science, but in practice they don't give a shit about science. They care about Elon Musk specifically for some reason.
Right, they care about things that have the science aesthetic.
Yep. Science aesthetic is the best way to put it.
They like a cool rocket. They don't like actual science. What's actual science, right?
It's statistics and tedium and failure.
It's like they don't actual science. They don't like. That's hard work.
Yep.
They just like the aesthetic of science, and and even when it comes to believing in science, okay, they don't believe in superstitious nonsense, right? But they'll probably believe in, something like,
Myers-Briggs.
Something better, right?
Yeah.
When science doesn't support that.
Or a Hyperloop. They're really into Hyperloop when we already have trains that are better than that, dude. Come on.
Bullet train. Let's make it happen.
So news that happened today. So I haven't fully, I've noticed something this year. There's been a lot more news that happens the day we're doing a show that we haven't had a chance to read up on yet.
I don't know. For tech, all the Apple days happened the day after we did a show because they were on Tuesdays.
But Uber, there was this thread a long time ago about Uber is exploiting workers for its business model. We know that.
Since day one.
They're devil cars. But their long-term play was to also invest in self-driving cars to eventually not even have to exploit workers and just fuck everybody over. That was their plan.
I mean, that would, on the one hand, that's bad because it puts the drivers out of work in a society without socialism.
But it's good in a society with socialism.
You're not being exploited. You can, if we had socialism, you could just stay at home and do nothing.
What a waste of a human mind to force them to drive a truck around the country for their entire youth.
Yep. Driver is the number one occupation, just driver in the United States. The number one job, driver of things, whatever it is. That includes truck drivers, cab drivers, everything.
The listener apparently really liked the statistics, tedium, and failure. That is what science is.
Is what science is.
But so that's what we all kind of assumed Uber was doing. And Lyft sort of made a name for itself as they're still exploitative. They're not better.
But no, they're the same.
They're not better, but they sold the image of we're not going to do self-driving cars. Uber's going to automate you out.
The image of we're less evil.
So. Oh, no, they sold it. It's not real. They're equally bad. But Uber apparently just sold its entire self-driving unit to some Aurora company.
Well, I wonder if this is, a lot of companies have sort of bailed out of the self-driving car game.
Because it turns out it's not progressing as fast as they thought.
Right. I think there's a few reasons. So reason number one, Uber did just successfully get their law passed in California to exploit workers further.
Also, if you voted in favor of that law, fuck you.
That Uber paid for. Uber is now trying to get similar, legislation passed in other states and places. Don't let them. Luckily, we don't have some easy, stupid referendum system like California does, so they can't pull that same shit in New York. But they're still trying.
Yep.
But also, since they have that law in place now, that's going to be very hard for Californians to remove. they don't need to replace the workers. They can just keep exploiting them legally without a threat from the courts.
And also, they can sell all this to some other company who will deal with all the problems of actually getting self-driving cars to the mass market and the consumer market.
Self-driving cars, while a good thing and while a possible thing, are even today, right, such a long play.
They're a short play for things that you can't, like Uber would not make money on as quickly as they'd like to.
They're not a short-term play, and it's, a short-term stock market, right?
Yeah.
You don't give a shit if you're going to do something that won't turn profits for 20 years, right? You're not allowed to do that. You got to.
But even more, I'm thinking this. I feel like companies like Uber, by basically offloading this to some other company to figure it out, they'll reap the same benefits if that technology comes to market, regardless.
Yep, they weren't never looking to sell self-driving cars to other people the way a car company is.
Now I'm curious to see, because I just read this news. I know professionally a lot of people who have quit capital markets jobs to go work for Uber on the self-driving cars. I feel like those people all made a terrible mistake because Uber does not need a massive engineering division if they're just exploiting workers with a rideshare app.
Well, I've also seen, just from an outsider, that there's already been. I think there was some battle over some employees that switched companies who are working on self.
Oh yeah, there were a bunch of people switch between these companies, but maybe they have IP. There's non-competes and lawsuits and nonsense.
There is the people who work on this is generally like a short list of places to work on this one problem, and it's the same set of people who are experts in that area, and sort of everyone in those places knows which ones are ahead and which ones are behind. And if you're behind, it's like, why even bother to continue? They're going to beat you to market. Their thing is going to be better than yours.
And if you try to poach workers, you're going to get sued. I think non-compete agreements are 100% bullshit, but they're still going to bother you. It's hard to fight them.
But it's like, why release the Sega Master System if you already know the NES is development? Right? It's like you can just stop then. You don't have to bother to. It's actually a good thing, right? Don't bother to go all the way through with this and release a piece of shit.
Oh my God! There's a funny story about
time and resources when someone else is already doing it better.
There's a funny story about the 45 record. The two competing formats of records, not the old era with the old 78s or whatever, but the 45 and the regular old 33 1/3, right?
Yep.
So supposedly, I don't remember all the details of this, the new record format was coming out and the industry did a demo of it, and the company that developed the 45 had not announced anything yet and basically realized, oh shit, someone already made a better record. What the fuck are we going to do now? But the other thing that's interesting is the CEO of Uber is joining the board of this company. So part of this is definitely shuffling money and investment around. A lot of the same players are still involved in everything. I think that's enough news. I'll skip the next news. All right. Let me put the marker so I can edit the show easily. But anyway, things of the day. So this article is a little long, but it'll go into the detail. If you read this article, you will understand what this person did. They made a tweet that quote tweeted itself.
A tweet that quote tweeted itself. So they tweeted out hello.
Yep. But that hello tweet was a retweet of the tweet that said hello.
So they had to do this with the API. There's no way to do it with the
They did it with the API. It involved guessing.
It was tweet ID 1, quote tweet ID 1.
So basically, they reverse engineered a lot of how tweet IDs work and figured out a way to guess the tweet ID of the tweet you're about to post so you could then include it in the tweet.
I see.
But the way they did it was really clever. And there's a lot of really, really fun side effects where you could do clever, interesting shit. If you read this, it is possible. I'm not going to mess with this because it seems like too much of a pain in the ass and it might be goatsy, but you could theoretically tweet something today that in the future will become a retweet of a tweet, meaning someone will tweet something.
You just quote tweet some ID of a tweet that's way out in the future. You don't
Yep.
know what you don't know what tweet that's going to be. It's like the current highest number tweet is 1 million. You quote tweet 2 million. 1 million tweets from now, suddenly your regular tweet becomes a quote tweet of a tweet that didn't exist when you tweeted it.
Yep. So if you do it right and you can maybe predict like how far out that tweet's likely to be, you could basically have a quote retweet where someone would tweet something clever and then notice that, wait a minute, how did Rib retweet me 4 years ago? What the fuck? So you can read this article that actually explains it all in excruciating detail. It's not actually that complicated, and it's pretty fun.
Okay.
So what do you got?
So here's a video from Chinese television. For some reason, the only Chinese television that seems to make it to at least my sphere of media consumption is always people doing like wacky Guinness records, sort of, silly type things. I'm not sure if like this is what they show on Chinese television a lot, or if this is just the thing that people who aren't from China show that being on Chinese television, right? That share, right?
Well, CCTV gets pushed pretty hard too, so.
Right. But anyway, yeah, so CCTV is Chinese state television, if you didn't know.
As Wikipedia will warn you if you click on this link.
Exactly. But that doesn't really matter because this is just a video of a dude jumping off the ground like a meter in the air almost, right? So it looks close to a meter. That's already a pretty good standing jump.
Yeah.
Right? I can't do that. Can you do that?
I have not tried in my adult life, but
I mean, I might get near the top. It's not.
Could I? I think I could. I'm going to try this later.
A lot of people, it's not the easiest. But
yeah, but I've been really, really working out my legs.
It's not the easiest, but you're not jumping though.
I am.
Oh. Okay. Well, it's not the easiest. I'm sure many people can do it, but not most people. Regardless, what's more amazing is that on top of the two, he's not jumping onto a platform either. He's jumping onto 2 sticks, right? So that's hard. But not only is he jumping onto 2 sticks, on top of each stick are little cushions, and each of those little cushions are 2 eggs, and you can tell they're real eggs because he keeps messing up, and the eggs break all over. Right?
Now,
this is not fake.
Now that is, I don't know if he messed up on purpose to like increase the drama, or if it is just that hard.
I'm sure it's not easy, but it's not a fake thing. Like they're not fake eggs. It's not some trick, right? It's simply a matter of the fact that eggshells are stronger than you think they are. They can support the weight of an entire hen easily.
Well, I mean, case in point, put an egg in your hand and try to just crush it.
Yeah, eggs are stronger than you think. It's like an arch, right? They have quite a lot of strength in them. They've evolved to be strong so that they don't break under the weight of animals sitting on them, right? Or attacking them or trying to eat them or whatever. But also, if you evenly distribute your weight, right, across a couple eggs, he's not doing 1 egg each, right? He's also doesn't appear to be that heavy a person. It'll be much more difficult for a heavy person to do this. But as not a heavy looking person, he can stand on less eggs. Someone, for me, I'd probably need more than 2 eggs per foot to stand on the egg, right? But if you evenly distribute your weight across them, no 1 egg will break, right? The jump just sort of makes it more dramatic and exciting. To get it and
but he's got to nail the landing right to not put too much force, like put more force than his body weight on it.
Yeah, so, regardless of Chinese propaganda TV, great job, egg jumping person. Awesome.
In the meta moment, I have not lit the Tale of Genji signal. I'm still reading this political book.
Okay.
Our bunch of panels are on YouTube. PAX just posted a video that we've never uploaded. We ran a version of the 40 tabletop games you should play at PAX Unplugged last year, and it happened to be...
Wasn't it several years ago?
No, it's 2019. And they put it in the...
I thought this one was from like 2017 or something.
I think this was from 2019, maybe 2018. I can look. I have a database I can go check.
Okay.
But anyway, it's a panel we didn't record because PAX had live streamed it on one of the PAX channels from PAX Unplugged. And they're doing reprises of popular panels. So they did a premiere live stream, meaning a panel that has never been on YouTube before, but is fairly similar to a very similar panel with the same name we've done before with only minor changes. It's now on YouTube. You can watch it.
All right. PAX announced they're gonna try to have a PAX next year. We are not gonna go unless it is like super safe. If it's not safe for me to go to like a crowded metal concert, then I'm not going
Yep.
to a PAX.
Here's the line. Here's what I will say, and I think you should apply this to your life. But this is the Geek Night standard. We will not attend any convention that requires masks, has COVID-related attendance limitations, or has any social distancing measures. Because if any of those three things are true, it is not safe to have a convention in the first place.
That's right. And if it's not, there's a convention.
Now, caveat: if a convention does not have all three and COVID is still going crazy, that is obviously we're not attending that con either.
As much as I want to go to a con, your life is your life. You're not gonna, if you die, you're not gonna go to any other con ever. If I just survive another even if I have to go and survive for 2 or 3 more years, right? How long did the Spanish flu take to
How many more PAXs will you get if you live to 70?
Right. If I just make it through that, if I just got to survive, then I can go to 20, 30, how many more PAXs? Right?
Yeah.
Right? If I go to the next,
I mean, you could go to 5 PAXs a year if you're really working at it.
Right. If I'm so desperate for a PAX, I go to one with masks and all sorts of protocols, and then I get friggin' sick and die. Well, that's my last PAX. Hope you enjoyed it.
So, to be clear, if masks are required, if social distancing is required, or if there are COVID-related attendance caps, do not under any circumstances attend any conventions for the love of God or Satan or whatever.
I will not attend a high attendance event of any kind until it is as safe as it was in 2019, 2018. Just go and not even think about it.
Yep. If I have to wear a mask, then I'm still in like personal lockdown in my life.
Of course, even in, now I think there might be one good positive, which is that masks used to only be a thing in certain cultures and places around the world.
Yep.
Maybe now when people are, regular sick, right? They just have a cold. They have, something like that.
Yep. Like still, like don't go to a con, but if you're already if we're already at a con and we're sick and we have to do a panel, like I'll wear a mask like before I go do the panel.
I mean, I'm not going to lie. I didn't do that before, but you know what? For the rest of my life, that's probably how I'm going to do it.
I'm glad this is being normalized. People should wear masks when they're sick, but do not attend a con.
Until I'm old, whenever. If I'm sick, I go outside where there's people, I'll wear one, which I didn't do previously. Probably should if I was wrong.
But so long as things are requiring masks, do not go to things.
All right. One other meta moment. So it is currently December 7th, right? The advent of code 20.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's basically, if you don't know about it, it's been going on since 2015. I met the person who created it once for like 30 seconds when they checked out a game at the PAX East tabletop library. But it's basically a little puzzle contest where every day from December 1st through December 25th, they put out a little puzzle and you solve it and type in the answer. And then if you're right or you're wrong. And there's a little competition aspect to it, but you don't have to worry about that part if you don't want to. Regardless, I am recording videos of myself solving the puzzle each day. I didn't upload all of them to YouTube because some of the videos came out shitty, but I live streaming and also, so I'll probably do one right after the show. So
Ooh, I'm looking at day 7. That actually looks pretty fun.
What's today? Today's day 7. I didn't do it yet.
Oh, the one about the rules for bags, like encoding the rules of this game, basically.
Oh, okay. I'll be doing that after the show.
I just went to the site so I could put something on the screen, and this one actually looks interesting.
They're all pretty interesting.
They are.
So the nature of these puzzles is like you could just solve them by hand or whatever, but they're structured in such a way that unless you're going to get an answer, you can't get the answer from someone else because everyone has a unique input file. And it calculates to make sure your answer matches your input file for you specifically. But you could steal someone else's code and run it on your input to get the answer. That's cheating. Kind of, right? Who cares? But if you're going to solve it yourself, you're probably going to have to enlist the aid of a computer, and you're going to have to use some sort of programming language. But I've seen people do it in Excel. I've seen people do it in Bash script. I've seen people do it on like web-based interpreters of various kinds.
Yep.
You can solve it using pretty much any computer tool you want. I'm just using Python because that's what I know the most and it's the easiest. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. You can go back and do the old years if you want to. Good times, even for a Jew, doing some Advent.
All right. So this was an idea we had for a show, like suddenly when we're trying to figure out what to talk about, but it's related to things we're doing in our lives right now. And actually, we have a long history of this, and it's a topic I think you'll find interesting. And the idea is, when and how do you extract value longer from technology, be it software or hardware that you've got? Like, is it worth it to keep an old TV for as long as possible until like the last piece of it is unrepairable? How long do you keep running that Pentium 2 before you give up and actually throw it away?
Right. And now this is something that's very important in an era when repairability has gone way down for a lot of things.
Yep.
Right? So things break and it's like, well, I guess I have to throw it out and buy a new one, right? If you could somehow keep it going, then it helps the environment, it helps your wallet, it helps so many things for, there's always, nerds on the one hand, we love to be on that bleeding edge. Like, ooh, there's something newer, faster, better, stronger. I want to get that. But if what you have is still perfectly good, or even if it's not perfectly good for your nerdy use case, it's still good for something.
Yep.
It's not useless. It's like, if you can keep it functioning, and maybe find a new purpose for it, maybe, keep it going. That's great. Especially since, like I said, waste, but e-waste is like even worse than just regular old waste.
It's all toxic.
Yeah, and it's like, some kid probably had to like mine rare minerals from some, trash dump or something to build that. It's already super bad capitalism to make the thing in the first place. If you waste it to buy a new one, now you've doubled that super bad capitalism.
Yep.
Right.
But even still, there's a very personal thing too, like directly to you as a user of technology around, and I used to say this a lot my whole life, whenever I had a computer, every day that I can continue to do what I do on a daily basis with my existing computer saves me money because I got more value out of the computer I built or bought, and I get one day further into the future when technology gets better and cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
I held on to some computers probably honestly way longer than I should have. Remember the era where like my computer would crash randomly trying to record GeekNights because I was like unwilling to buy a new one?
Yeah. But not only that, right? Do you make your shit last longer, right? You get more use out of the same thing, but the time it takes to replace a thing and especially a computer, but also other things, get used to a new thing, learn a new thing, configure a new thing, set up a new thing, right? Is time that you're not using the thing, right? You're not, getting the productivity out of it. You're doing some meta work of setting up your environment and configuring shit and learning. And that's time where you're not producing. So the longer you can, if you get a setup, the longer you can make that setup a productive setup that continues to function well without having to completely mess with it and redo it or replace things, is more productivity from you. Another day you could just podcast. If Rim buys like a new microphone, it's like, well, podcast's gonna take an extra hour today. Rim bought a new thing.
Yep, I gotta calibrate everything and figure out the pipeline and set the line levels and all that nonsense.
Just use the setup we have another day. It's like, oh, that's another day that we can, don't have.
It's funny. We're saying this. I got the audition screen here recording this episode of Geek Nights right now. I threw together a hacky like pipeline to handle you being remote, but I never templatized it. So every night we do the show, I just open the old file, save as, and continue.
Well, templatize it today.
I actually am planning to templatize it this week because I just templatized the other shows like the Disney show. So
okay, so let's talk about ways to accomplish this. How do you get more blood from the stone, right?
Now, some of this involves planning a little bit in advance, especially with computers. With computers, whenever you buy or build a new computer, at least look at how upgradable it is. Where in the cycle of technology advancement is it right now? Does it have 2 slots for RAM or 4 slots for RAM? Like, those are things that if you look at that early, that is how I have milked computers for so long in my life. I'll buy something, and even if I'm trying to save money, it has 4 DIMM slots. I'll buy one stick of RAM to stick in it so that later I can buy a second large stick as opposed to buying 4 small sticks and then I have to buy all new RAM when I want to replace it. Little things like that add up.
All right. So the first thing you want to do is go and listen. We've done 2 episodes of Geek Nights on computer maintenance. We did one in 06 and we did one in 2020, right? So that's just for computers, but the general topic of maintenance applies to everything, right?
Yep.
Everything that you have in your whole house, from like sharpening your kitchen knives to, just cleaning shit, watering your plants.
Yep. If your computer's full of dust, it's slower than it would otherwise be.
Right. Maintenance takes time and it takes effort, but it pays out, right? You get back for your investment. So the next time you're spending an hour cleaning and it feels like, oh man, this sucks, I hate doing this, right? You just bought yourself, right? Like how knows how long, in some other department of something not breaking, something not needing to be replaced, something not getting all gross and gummed up, right? You lubricate some motor. It's like you spent, even if you spent a long time on that, you effectively just purchased a motor because the one that you're not going to have to purchase because the one you just lubricated is going to work that much longer.
Yep. You know what? Case in point, the trumpet that I'm playing like every day during this quarantine. I've had that trumpet since 1995. And you know what? I maintain it. I oil it. I clean it. I take it apart and run snakes through it. I replace parts on it. Buying a trumpet that expensive every 5 or 10 years would have been a big problem. But that trumpet is completely fine. It'll last another 50 years the way I'm maintaining it.
All right. Another way to make sure things last a long time is to buy the right thing to begin with. Now, this has a problem in that it's sort of a privilege of people who have a lot of money.
Yep, I buy a $4,000 to $5,000 computer every 7 to 10 years.
It's not just buying something that's way strong and way ahead of the curve so that it doesn't become obsolete because it's so powerful and new, right? Like buying a 4K TV before they're a thing,
Yeah.
and that way you just have one, right? That is a thing, but it's also buying the right thing. So I think my bicycles are a great example of this, right? So the bicycle that I bought when I moved to the city in 2010, right? I just sort of went in the bike shop and I bought a $400-ish Trek, whatever, right? And the 2 choices were one that was slightly small and one that was slightly big. So I took the slightly big one because it had a more upright comfortable sitting position because it was bigger, right? And it wasn't bad. I rode that bike a long ass time. I made it work a long ass time. I repaired it several times.
Yep.
But because it was a little bit too big, that can't be fixed, right? It was slightly the wrong thing. It's
just like computer. You buy a motherboard that is not upgradable, it was probably the wrong thing.
Right. It was the wrong thing for me. It didn't fit. I kept using it regardless. I made it last quite a long time. But then the bicycles that I bought now, I spent more money and time and research, right, getting ones that are exactly right and are ultra high quality. These I expect to last forever unless they break or something bad happens to them, right? They'll last my whole life, I assume.
Now the privilege thing, this gets tossed around a lot, but it's very worth remembering. That Terry Pratchett quote from I think Discworld, Ringworld, whatever, Discworld stuff. I've never actually read any of those books. I'm only familiar with them tangentially.
I know that Terry Pratchett wrote Discworld. I've never read any of it.
But there's that Vimes Boots theory of socioeconomic fairness, where the cheap boots are affordable, but they wear out every couple of years. No one poor can afford expensive boots, but expensive boots last forever. It is more expensive to be poor.
Exactly.
And that applies to technology too. Trying to keep using Adobe CS4 in I know people are using CS4 to this day. That is causing more pain and anguish and difficulty than the cost of buying new software. But that's what you got in some cases.
Yeah, if you don't, it's the thing is, it's they got choices. They can keep using what they got, which costs pain, anguish, and difficulty and time. Or they can use this other thing that will save them pain, anguish, difficulty, and time, but costs money. But when you're poor, you have time, you have pain, you
Yep.
don't have money. So that's all you have.
And computing in particular, both software and hardware, you can get a lot of value out of both software and hardware if you have and are willing to spend the time, to the point that you can save terrifying amounts of money. But if you have money, those things are a waste of your time.
Exactly. Getting the right thing to begin with, putting in lots of research, figuring out, knowing yourself, knowing what you're going to use things for, right? What their purpose is, exactly what your needs are.
Yep. What does a video card do? Like, that's a very specific example. If you're not a gamer or you only play like simple games that don't require like a crazy GPU and you're not streaming, but you want to watch 4K stuff on a TV, you can get like an Intel i7, which will integrated chips will just play 4K video fine. And that's enough. That while the i7 chip is more expensive than the other Intel chips, you don't have to buy a video card for your use case. You'll save yourself a ton of money. That thing will last forever.
I mean, I look at, for example, a case where maybe I didn't sort of buy the exact, I sort of did and didn't buy the exact right thing in like the camera department, right? So I have like a pile of cameras. I basically need, at this point, 0 more cameras. I haven't bought any camera stuff in a long ass time, right? I mean, this year, because I haven't gone outside, but I didn't buy any last year either. Or I don't even, I guess since, it's been a long time since I bought the camera stuff. And I don't need any more because I finally figured out, these are the cameras, these are the lenses I find myself using a lot, right? I needed to know, myself more, but I see other people in the camera world who are buying all new stuff constantly, right? They're constantly selling all their stuff and buying all new stuff, selling all their stuff, buying all new stuff, switching all over the place. And I'm like, it's like, they must not know. Either they just like buying stuff, which is true.
I mean, they might be a camera hobbyist. Like, their joy in life is play with this lens for 10 minutes.
Sure. But I feel like if your goal is to use the thing, right?
Yep.
You're at some point, you're going to figure out what's the right one for you. And then you'll be able to stick with that one for an absurdly long amount of time.
Yep.
Right? I bought cameras that are older than me that are still good. If I had bought them when they were new, I could have been the original purchaser and still had them.
Which leads us to sort of point 2, which is a little more directly relevant. Irrespective of if you have money to buy the right tool in the first place brand new, whatever tool it is that you're using, learn how it works. Like, fully learn how it works. Learn it enough to recognize what's wrong with it. A normal person has a TV that doesn't work anymore and they throw it away. Someone who knows a little bit about TVs might realize that certain kinds of TVs, like one set of capacitors will like fail and the backlight doesn't work, but the TV's fine. And they can repair that TV for like a small amount of money, like $20, and the TV's fine again. Computers. If you know what part of your computer broke, you can replace just that part. That a lot of people.
There have probably been. Think about how much stuff has been thrown out every year simply by people who don't know better. And there's also a lot of cases, right, where people throw stuff out and people who know better are actually by policy or by law or other things unable. I read, because a good example, I was reading about this. If you were, Best Buy is like actually one of the places in the US where a lot of e-recycling happens, because they'll just accept electronics there to be recycled. A lot of the Best Buy employees happen to be nerdy people who know some stuff, right? And they see someone bring something in that's perfectly good and working, and they want it, but if they take it, they will be fired and in big trouble. So they don't. And that stuff just goes to who knows where.
But you, especially if you are like a nerd or you have time but not money, if you have a thing where you need to learn this level of detail just for your own productivity or hobbies or entertainment, you could have a side hustle on repairing things for people. And that's a way to get more money to buy a better tool. I have done those kinds of things in the past. At high school, I would fix other people's computers for cash. You know what fixing them entailed in most cases? Fucking nothing. Nothing was wrong with the computer. Nothing at all. I charged the same price no matter what, and I would just hand them the computer back and say, it's working now. Like, I remember I fixed someone's computer once. This was a rich family that I just happened to know. Their computer wasn't working. The monitor was broken. And I went to fix it. They didn't know what resolution it was or how to change it. This giant monitor had like 640 by 480 outputting to it. I right-clicked in Windows. I fixed that. And they paid me $40.
Okay.
In the year 1996.
Sure. So
But,
another way, right? So, now we're sort of into like this, reduce, reuse, recycle situation, right? So, you make a thing last longer, but you can also reduce, right? So reduce means waste less shit. But actually, when it comes to technology, right, buying less stuff could actually mean that the few things you did buy get used a lot more, which means they might break faster. So I've found that sometimes, depending on what it is, like with shoes, for example, right? If I have 2 shoes for 2 different purposes, again, privilege of being able to afford 2 shoes at once, both shoes last longer because, like, I have an inside, it's at the office. I haven't worn it in a year. I got like an inside only shoe at the office, right? Having that shoe lasts forever. It never touches anything that's not carpet.
Yeah.
At the shoe store, right? It's like that shoe lasts so many years, but that shoe removes all the indoor carpet walking from my outdoor only shoe. The outdoor only shoe, yeah, it wears out faster than the indoor only shoe, but it gains a much longer life, right? So just by buying that one extra shoe once, right, over time, that actually adds up to like more than 1 pairs of shoes worth of wear, right, by being a carpet only shoe. Right? So sometimes if you buy more than one thing, right, especially the kind of thing that wears with use, maybe you might want to get more than one. A good example I might think of is I do this. I know a lot of people have like a Joy-Con drift, right? I swap my Joy-Cons between 2 sets.
I started doing the same thing.
Neither one is drifting yet, but I just swap the Joy-Cons whenever I think about doing it. And so that means, both of them are still working. So it's, not wearing one out with a ton of use. Right?
Yep. So we've gone on a while. So I think let's end on a very practical note with a computer specifically, not Macs, because that's a different world, but with regular old computers, desktop workstation type computers. What are the things you can do specifically to wring as much blood out of that stone as possible? And it comes down to low-hanging fruit. What are the cheapest things you can upgrade that will give that computer more performance? An old computer usually uses older, slower RAM. You can probably buy that RAM real cheap.
Probably, if it's still available.
Yep.
Sometimes, occasionally, there's an ultra rare RAM.
Yep, if it's too old, it gets more expensive again. there's a diminishing return at that point.
Well, I mean, the RAM for my Mac Plus was super cheap.
But like my previous computer, it had 6 DIMM slots because it was weird. Like it was a weird tri-channel thing that didn't last that long. But what that meant was I bought for like $5 each a pile of 2 gigabyte DIMMs, and I filled it with them to get 12 gigabytes of memory. It cost me like $25 plus shipping, and that literally let me use that computer for another year before I really had to get rid of it.
The other thing is, when it comes to computers are general purpose devices. They can do a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So a lot of people, they just have a computer, and having a second computer seems kind of useless to them. Like they'll just get rid of the first computer when they get a second one, right? Okay, your computer's so old, it won't do the things you need to do with that anymore. It won't run the newest Photoshop. It won't play the newest games. It's really slow when you browse the web, right? It's like...
Might be fine as an HTPC.
Might be fine as an HTPC. It might be fine as like doing a Pi-hole in your house.
Yeah.
even
Or
though it's big and loud because it's a desktop. It's like just hide it in a closet somewhere.
Or here's a higher end example. So my current computer with the 1080 GPU I have and everything else going on, I cannot handle 3 simultaneous OBSs and an Nginx. Like I cannot do a very complex streaming environment with a lot of sources and destinations on one PC. I could make a PC strong enough to do that, but that would be a lot more expensive than buying a second cheaper computer with a very cheap video card and offloading all those other streams to that other computer.
Mm-hmm.
Like a lot of streamers, instead of building a god PC to stream and play their 144 like refresh rate FPSs competitively, they'll just buy a second cheaper computer, and all that computer does is stream. That allows them to save money on like in the end, because 2 good computers are way cheaper than 1 extreme computer by a scary margin.
Right. By learning a lot about the computer, right, you may be able to find ways, uses and ways to breathe new life into it, right?
Like, where is the bottleneck? If you know where the bottlenecks are, you know what to upgrade, or you know that that thing isn't feasible to upgrade. It lets you make these decisions.
Or seemingly, even if you don't upgrade it, even in its unupgraded state, it still might have a useful purpose if it's not broken.
Yeah.
Or there might be some way to, make it like nicer to use considering what year it is, like how I upgraded my GBA screen, right? It's like, yeah, not gonna, the GBA kind of useless. I can just emulate all these GBA games on another platform. This thing is, could have thrown it out. Or I upgraded the screen in it. I put new battery in it. Now it's like the nicest handheld I have. It just, it plays anything up to GBA games.
Yeah. Sometimes you can even use this to route around damage. I had a computer that bit by bit, all the USB slots one by one had mechanical, like they had shorting issues where if anything was plugged into them, the computer was more and more likely to crash. So it got to the point to where there's only one USB port that worked. That was the GeekNights computer that kept crashing.
Okay.
But I didn't want to buy a new computer yet because the computer was still more than capable of doing everything I wanted to do with it, including producing GeekNights. So what I do, I bought a USB hub and I plugged it into the last functioning USB port. And I just unplugged inside of the computer all the USB headers that were having these shorting problems. And I got another like year and a half out of that computer.
Yeah, but whatever your old thing is, right? So, maybe you've got a laptop, right, that you had in college and it's been in the closet and you haven't touched it, right? And it's like, okay, if you try maybe it's a MacBook. It can't run Big Sur. It's so old the newest OS X won't install on it, right? It's just really, really sad and kind of meh, right? What do you do with it? It's like you would never use it instead of the computers you have and use now, right? But maybe, because you don't care about it that much, maybe you can use it when you go, like, out in the woods and you might get damaged. You won't care so much, right? Maybe you can use it, it's like it can still word process, right? Maybe it's comfy to go use it for some typing. You're just going to do some typing, go take that one out somewhere. If it gets, something happens to it, or whatever, it's a cheap old computer, Maybe
but the key there is that knowledge. You have to learn a lot more and a lot of different things that you might not expect you need to learn about your hardware, about whatever it is you're using, in order to have a lot of these options we're talking about.
Yeah, maybe you got an old Wii. Well, guess what? You can install that old Wii. People are hacking their Wiis, installing special OSs and playing.
Here's a crazy example. Remember at RIT when the capacitors were a problem and like computers were all dying? So my computer had the bad capacitors. I could not afford to replace that motherboard. Like I didn't have any money, but I underclocked my CPU, the Athlon K7 800, and the computer with the leaking capacitors was more stable, and that bought me time to save up money to buy a new motherboard. But I knew that underclocking it would reduce the stress on the problematic component due to research. Without knowing that, I would have just been fucked. My computer just would have crashed every day and I would have been screwed.
Oh, maybe you, like me, you just replaced your phone, right? Well, maybe your old phone, you could use it for a cool project. Remember that guy who would like put the phones with the booby traps in the...
oh, yeah.
people, right? It's like a phone is like a camera and a computer in a little tiny package with a battery and everything and radios. It's like you can have a lot of fun with a phone. If you've got a new phone and your old phone still functions, your old phone could at least be a cool backup phone or
Yeah.
give it to someone else.
That's what I'm literally doing now. I put my SIM card in my new phone. My old phone, I still power it on. It works on Wi-Fi. That's the house phone. I'll just like leave it. In fact, you know what I've seen what I always wanted to do. I never did this because we never had any reason because everyone we know has a smartphone. I just wanted to take old tablets and smartphones, put a generic account on them, and just leave them out like on the coffee table. Like, oh, you want to browse the web while you're hanging out? Like, just that's the house phone just hanging out for anyone to browse the web on.
Yeah, it's like there are not that you have anyone visiting now.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, with creativity and like there are purposes for new stuff or old stuff or stuff that isn't your primary stuff anymore. Right? So, figure it out and you'll be helping yourself, the environment, your wallet.
Yep. Well, look, if I had been more diligent, you know what I could have done with that old computer? I could have tried to replace those capacitors. It was only 6 of them. I was too much of a coward.
Anyway,
All right, I think that was a good show.
Okay.
We went